It's truly special to witness a figure that can inspire and astound you for their performances as they do in their real life. If the only Eddie Guerrero we ever knew was the remarkable athlete whose appealing underhandedness and raw emotion artfully enhanced his razor-sharp wrestling, we'd have been privileged enough. But to see that same man be written off and forsaken due to his own overwhelming demons, only to valiantly and sincerely turn his life around for the better, is to find that achievement greater than any of his working exploits. The man known as Latino Heat touched the heart of millions in both well-crafted fiction and stark reality. I'm Jack from Cultaholic.com, and this is the captivating career of Eddie Guerrero. It's not always easy following in the footsteps of prolific relatives in many walks of life. Eddie Guerrero was destined to join Father Gory and brothers Chavo, Mando, and Hector, all three of whom were at least 13 years older than him, in the wrestling business, and even began wrestling as a young boy. When he and nephew Chavo Jr. were under 10 years old, they would playfully wrestle each other as well as against Gory at exhibition shows. Guerrero attended New Mexico Highlands University on an athletics scholarship, but was set on carrying on the Guerrero name inside of a wrestling ring. Before too long, Eddie asked his father to train him. Eddie made his debut in September 1986, wrestling in a 2 out of 3 falls tag team match in Mexico City for the EMLL promotion, known today as CMLL. He spent much of his first 6 years in the business wrestling for the then EMLL, but made appearances elsewhere, including alongside brother Mando in tag team action for the AWA. He also wrestled for WCW in that time, working as a jobber in defeat to Terry Funk that May. Oftentimes in EMLL, Guerrero gained valuable experience teaming with his veteran brothers in trios matches, and by 92, he'd improved to the point where he took part in New Japan's Best of the Super Juniors, facing the likes of Chris Benoit, Koji Kanemoto, and Jushin Thunder Liger. Guerrero's time with the company that had now become CMLL drifted to an end later in 92 when his mid-card position was compounded by being given a gimmick he disliked, working under a mask as Mascara Magica. Guerrero soon ditched the promotion in favour of AAA, where he wore the mask getup in front of crowds before defiantly removing it and proudly announcing that he didn't need it. But one mask he did wear with pride was bestowed upon him by New Japan officials in 93, when he happily agreed to assume Mark Rocco's Black Tiger gimmick. He debuted in the role on the first night of the 93 G1 Climax, defeating El Samurai in Nagoya. Now back over to AAA, where Guerrero teamed with El Hijo del Santo as La Pareja Atomica, playing off his father Gory's partnership with El Santo under that same team name. In the spring of 93, Guerrero turned on his partner and quickly aligned with Art Barr, forming La Pareja del Terra. The pair, along with other members of Los Gringos Locos, including Conan and Louis Spiccoli, terrorized AAA with their underhanded tactics and drew genuine rage from crowds for their spitefulness and their mean-spirited taunts. In July 94, Guerrero and Barr defeated El Hijo del Santo and Octagon at a AAA event in Chicago to become World Tag Team Champions. The pair's reign lasted into November, and they would never formally lose the belts. They did, however, lose their hair at AAA's When Worlds Collide pay-per-view that November. In Los Angeles, in what may have been the most thrilling and heated match of his career, Eddie teamed with Barr in defeat to El Hijo del Santo and Octagon in a 2 out of 3 falls match where the Technicos wagered their masks. The sight of Guerrero and Barr tearfully ruining their fate while their hair was shorn off to the delight of the crowd capped off an instant classic, on par with any match Eddie has ever had throughout his career. The two are now being looked at by a number of promotions, especially ECW. But before the tag team could field any serious inquiries, tragedy dealt a hefty blow. Just 17 days after When Worlds Collide, Art Barr died of what was believed to be a drug-related heart attack, aged just 27. In tribute, Eddie adopted Barr's trademark move of the Frog Splash as his own, and it would remain his finisher for the next decade plus. His own career continued onward, still working both AAA and New Japan with frequency, though ECW did eventually come calling. In his very first match with the company in April 95, Guerrero pinned television champion Too Cold Scorpio to win the title. Coincidentally, it was Scorpio who had given the Frog Splash its name back in the day after seeing the unique manner in which Art Barr had performed it. Guerrero spent less than 5 months with ECW, holding the TV title on 2 separate occasions. However, the skilled second-generation star lasted long enough to leave ECW fans forever captivated through his series of matches with Dean Malenko. Whether it was their time-limit draws or their exchanges of the belt, ECW fans were treated as some of the best wrestling North America had ever seen, all thanks to Eddie and Malenko. That August, the pair, alongside with Chris Benoit Benoit finished up with ECW upon being hired by WCW. Eddie and Malenko ended their rivalry with the promotion by going to a double pin in the final fall of a 2 out of 3 falls battle, one final classic. Eddie and his fellow wrestling virtuosos were signed by Eric Bischoff, with the idea being that they would be the frenetic blurs of action, the eye-catching contrast to the charismatic main event heavyweights, which would in theory give WCW broadcasts plenty of variety. So while he didn't have much to do storyline-wise, Eddie was part of those early episodes of Nitro, battling Malenko and Benoit in short but exciting matches that were in line with Bischoff's vision. Slightly higher profile matches saw Eddie battle Johnny B. Bad for the TV title and wrestle Shinjiro Otani in an absolute thriller at Starrcade 95 as part of the WCW vs New Japan World Cup of Wrestling. Eddie lived a dual existence in 96 as both a moderately pushed babyface sensation in WCW as well as still working hard in New Japan, where he won the 96 Best of the Super Juniors tournament as Black Tiger, defeating Benoit and then Liger to win it all. Back home in WCW, Eddie unsuccessfully challenged the likes of Conan and even Ric Flair for the US title in pay-per-view bouts before winning the vacant belt that December at Starrcade. He did so by impressively defeating DDP in a tournament final. His old feud with Malenko, as well as a fresh one with Sean Waltman, kept him occupied in the early part of 97, dropping the gold to Malenko at Uncensored. Eddie missed several months with a torn pectoral sustained in that match at Uncensored, but would return with a beneficial change, a heel turn. Eddie attacked Malenko upon his re-emergence and through his newfound sourness beat down relatives Hector and Chavo Jr. in matches that summer. He captured the Cruiserweight title from Chris Jericho at that year's Fall Brawl, setting the stage for another gem. At Halloween Havoc 97, Eddie wagered his belt against Rey Mysterio Jr.'s Mask. The crowd in Las Vegas were treated to easily one of the greatest matches in WCW history as Mysterio fought off Eddie's sadistic onslaught, meting out the victory in sensational fashion. Like that tag match back in AAA, it is still today remembered as one of the best matches of Eddie's career. Eddie soon after regained the belt before losing it to Ultimo Dragon and later focused on Chavo, forcing his well-meaning nephew into a dutiful acolyte role that extended into the summer. As the storyline progressed, Chavo displayed more pronounced craziness while under his uncle's auspices. But in reality, Eddie was the one who was at his wit's end, feeling like he and the other cruiserweights were being taken for granted. At one stage, Eddie asked Eric Bischoff for his release and ended up in a heated row with his boss. During the altercation, Bischoff's coffee was knocked over and spilled on Eddie's pants, and the story that came out was that Bischoff angrily threw the coffee at him. This animosity inspired a worked shoot angle, we all love those, later that summer, where a frustrated Eddie quit live on Nitro before vanishing for 6 weeks. He returned in October, rounding up a band of other forgotten luchadors and forming the Latino World Order. The stable kicked around for much of the fall, essentially culminating when Eddie failed to win the Cruiserweight title from Billy Kidman at Starrcade. But days later, tragedy very nearly struck when Guerrero, dealing with serious personal issues and a strained marriage with wife Vicky, wrecked his car in the early morning hours of New Year's Day 1999. Just before the accident, Eddie took what he recalled as 5 good-sized shots of Renutrient, a legal form of GHB, in what he would describe as a passive, perhaps subconscious, suicide attempt. Eddie was lucky to survive the crash, hitting a curve wall at well over 100 miles an hour and flying out of the T-top. In all, the man who had just wrestled days earlier at Starrcade fractured his collarbone, broke his right hip socket, shredded his left calf, and lacerated his liver. Doctors thought his career was over, but less than 6 months later, he was back in the ring, wrestling Juventud Guerrera on Nitro. He soon formed the Filthy Animals stable with Mysterio, Kidman, and Conan, but physical issues continued to plague him. An attempt to straight up quit using painkillers for good caused Guerrero to have a frightening medical episode as his body couldn't handle the sudden withdrawal symptoms. Instead of following doctors' orders to rest though, Eddie continued to wrestle. So while Guerrero continued to deal with this slew of medical calamities, the situation in WCW had become even more tumultuous. New booker Vince Russo was out after just 3 months, and Guerrero, along with several other wrestlers, demanded their releases from the company upon learning that Kevin Sullivan was taking the book. He, Benoit, Malenko, and Perry Saturn were given their unconditional releases from the company, and 2 weeks later created a huge stir when they arrived on Raw's Wall. Within minutes, the quartet, soon to be called the Radicals, laid waste to the New Age Outlaws. Unfortunately for Guerrero, however, on his second night in the company, he popped his elbow out of his socket during a frog splash. But the Radicals began to forge their own identities before long, none more colourful than Eddie's role development. After feuding with China, the two formed an unlikely power couple just after WrestleMania 2000, a union that brought Guerrero the European title. This period gave us the wonderful sight of Eddie beating up S.A. Rios while wearing a bow tie and prom slacks. But trouble would rear its head due to Eddie's amorous ways, and after pinning Chyna to win the IC belt later that summer, he lost her love when GTV surveillance footage showed him emerging from a shower with two of the Godfather's ladies. And no, Adam, don't start singing that bloody What Happened to That Wrestler song, please. While Eddie remained a visible part of the product in the early part of 2001, including beating Test at WrestleMania X7 to regain the European title, his personal life was falling apart. Vicky had grown weary of her husband's ongoing addiction and associated issues and asked for a divorce. Benoit and Malenko even went to Jim Ross to express their concerns about their stablemate. Eddie arrived so out of it to one TV taping that he was given an ultimatum: go to rehab or lose your job. Even after a lengthy and arduous stint in rehab, Eddie continued to drink, and a vehicular incident in November 2001 led to both his arrest and his termination from WWE. Determined to right himself, Eddie swore off drinking and began to rebuild his life and his career. A noted run through the indies followed, working with the likes of Loki, Christopher Daniels, and CM Punk, and even returning to New Japan for their Hyper Battle Tour in March 2002. A week after that trip to Japan, Eddie returned to WWE, attacking IC champion Rob Van Dam on Raw. And while Guerrero was regaining his mojo as a wrestler, capturing the gold from Van Dam at Backlash, he and Vicky began to mend fences in his personal life, and eventually their divorce papers were rescinded. By then, Eddie had re-established himself as a dynamic force on WWE programming, in part thanks to a ladder match with RVD and a no DQ match with Edge, both among the better TV matches of that time. That fall, Guerrero reunited with Chavo to form Los Guerreros. Though initially rule-breaking heels, the duo's creative cheating and carefree attitude towards it won over many fans. Together, they won the WWE Tag Team titles in a triple threat match at Survivor Series 2002, beating the other members of the vaunted SmackDown 6, Edge, Rey Mysterio, Kurt Angle, and Chris Benoit. By the spring of 2003, uncle and nephew were fully babyface, aided by vignettes that depicted the two scheming their way through different scenarios, with lie, cheat, and steal as their easy-to-remember MO. A bicep injury for Chavo led to Eddie soldiering on with Tajiri, briefly holding the tag team gold with him before dropping the belts to the world's greatest tag team. A heel turn followed, not that fans really wanted to boo Guerrero, however. He defeated Benoit to win the reinstated United States belt at Vengeance in 2003, and his surreptitious actions only continued to draw further cheers. After defeating John Cena in a parking lot brawl, Eddie reunited with a returning Chavo to regain those tag titles from Shelton and Charlie Haas. This signified another babyface turn as the pair embraced the positive responses that their clever and resourceful characters received. They didn't hold on to those tag belts for long, but for Eddie, a greater prize awaited. In January 2004, after splitting off from a now heel Chavo, Eddie won a special 15-man Rumble on SmackDown to earn a shot at WWE Champion Brock Lesnar at No Way Out. Over 11,000 strong at San Francisco's Cow Palace watched an unlikely underdog story play out as Guerrero, with a tiny assist from Goldberg and maybe another assist from the title belt itself, vanquished the Beast Incarnate to capture the gold that many would have assumed was never going to be his to win. And yet Eddie, just as Benoit would do the following month at WrestleMania 20, pushed through adversity and glass ceilings to win a major world title on the WWE stage. Guerrero defended the belt in some rather extraordinary matches, defeating Kurt Angle in a WrestleMania Classic and retaining over longtime rival Mysterio in one of the greatest SmackDown matches ever. But a new challenger entered the fray, JBL. Eddie lost an alarming amount of blood against JBL in a narrow escape at Judgment Day, but he wasn't so lucky at the Great American Bash, losing the gold to the brash Texan in a hard-hitting bull rope match. Guerrero turned his focus back to Kurt Angle, who had been hassling him in his role as SmackDown's general manager. The two met at SummerSlam, only for Angle to get the better of him this time around. A near half-hour-long performance in the 2005 Royal Rumble match preceded Eddie's final title victory when he and Rey Mysterio won tag team gold from the Basham Brothers at No Way Out 2005. The fellow tag champs then wrestled each other in the opener of WrestleMania 21, with Mysterio winning the competitive friendly. They dropped the belts to the emerging M&M tag team, and Guerrero ended up burning his bridge with Mysterio with a darker, more brooding character who battled Rey over the coming months, and claimed to be the actual father of Mysterio's son Dominic. This led to the infamous Custody of Dominic ladder match at SummerSlam, won of course by Rey Mysterio. That fall, Eddie entered into a feud with World Heavyweight Champion Batista and demonstrated a way too friendly attitude for the distrusting title holder to really believe. But in their title bout at No Mercy on Eddie's 38th birthday, he opted not to cheat via a steel chair when given the chance, and this decision basically cost him the match. This signified another face turn for Eddie, who remained a peripheral part of the title scene and had apparently earned Batista's trust through his continued shows of benevolence. The following month, Guerrero qualified for a spot on SmackDown's Survivor Series team, but his participation would sadly not come to pass. On the morning of November 13th, 2005, Eddie Guerrero was found dead in a hotel room in Minneapolis, caused by acute heart failure. Tributes flooded in not only from legions of fans who came to appreciate his one-in-a-billion talent and skill set, but also from his professional peers who had come to the same conclusion that there was no one else like him. The following April, Guerrero was posthumously inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, accepted by wife Vicky and daughters Shaul and Sherilyn. But the memories continue to live on. Eddie Guerrero's legacy is one of a wrestler who inspired millions on two fronts. One, through his enthralling work as an entertainer, and two, for his resilience and resolve outside of the ring. Thanks very much for watching, and let us know what you think in the comments section down below. You can follow Cultaholic on Twitter at Cultaholic and on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you enjoy what we do, then please do check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Cultaholic, where you can pledge. And don't forget, of course, most importantly of all, to hit subscribe and to join us.